morning, people. Welcome back to F Politics. You should know that I am petty. I am not the bigger person and I don't ever want to be. If everybody around you is screaming that your actions hurt people and you continue regardless, then if later down the line something bad happens to you, especially if it's because of the problem that you'd been defending, then I will get my Francesca Ramsey on and rejoice in the leopards eating your face. And if I was personally involved, I will throw seasoning on a motherfucker to make sure that those leopards have a good time. Ladies and gentlemen, Albie Amankona.
I'm a former GB News host who was sacked for calling someone I believe to be racist a racist. I started at GB News because it was edgy, it was all about free speech, it was about doing things differently. But the more and more I started working there, I felt like I was confronted with just the most awful opinions, things that were undeniably racist, homophobic, just downright bigoted. And then when I called Suella Braverman racist and a thoroughly bigoted woman, I was dropped.
I believe she is actually racist and a thoroughly bigoted woman.
There are former colleagues of mine who are white, like Carol Malone, who have said similar things, like calling Diane Abbott a bigot.
She is a bigot. She is what a bigot looks like.
And they still remain at the channel with no sort of reprimand whatsoever. I'm taking the fight to GB News through an employment tribunal. They need to be held to account for the way that they treat their employees. They need to be held to account for the way that they treat their black on-air members of staff differently to their white on-air members of staff, and they need to be held to account for the way that they report the news.
Now, I'm not so blinded by my pettiness that I'd want to get in the way of the Good Law Project doing the good work that they do and using this evidence of actual racism as a way to take GB News down a peg. However, let's look into what he's actually saying. For starters, he says that GB News fired him for calling Conservative MP Suella Braverman racist. But just a couple of years ago, he acknowledged that Suella Braverman was right-wing, but said that that just proves that the Conservative Party was a broad church. He said that that's why we win, it's our greatest strength. So just a couple of years ago, he was bragging about somebody who he now calls racist being a significant part of the Conservative Party that he was defending. And a few months ago in a radio debate with me, he said this.
I think what Femi has is what I like to call Kemi derangement syndrome. You'll find a lot of black British media commentators like Femi just slagging her off constantly. Look, ultimately, you want to call Conservative Party members racist. The Conservative Party has just voted a black woman to be the leader of the Conservative Party.
But my favourite bit is his reaction to this.
Reform UK, kicking out a member of the British press. See, I'm being physically manhandled. I have just arrived. I've done nothing.
Now let's compare Albie being fired from GB News and me being kicked out of the Reform Party's rally. In both cases, we have a black journalist being removed against his will from an establishment that is at least partially owned by Nigel Farage, and in both cases the black journalist cited racism as one of the factors. Now I should point out a key difference here in that Albie Amankona was effectively employed by Nigel Farage for a news station that was essentially set up to be more right-wing than the BBC. So while Albie was treated racially unfairly, that racial unfairness is kind of baked in and expected. Whereas I was a journalist covering a major political event, I'm not supposed to share their views. This happened during an election with a party that is currently topping the polls, and they were seeking to become the next government. And they made the decision to kick out a black journalist because he criticizes them. Now, because they'd rented out the Birmingham National Exhibition Centre, they had control over that area, and so they used that control to kick me out. If they were in government, they would have control over the whole country. So what do you think they'll do to people who criticize them then? But at the time, Albie Amankona explicitly defended that level of fascism. He said it had nothing to do with my race and everything to do with the fact that we disagree politically. And I don't fully understand if he was being sarcastic with us or not, but at some point during our argument about this, he literally said, yes, I am defending fascists. Now, Albie will tell you to this day that he still maintains that Nigel Farage is not racist. However, he is accusing GB News of being racist, and that's one of the reasons he was kicked out of there. And he's suing GB News, but Nigel Farage is a major shareholder within GB News. He partly owns the thing. So if he wins this case against GB News on the basis of racism in employment, he will be effectively taking money away from Nigel Farage. After making fun of me for calling Nigel Farage and the Reform Party racist, he's now trying to effectively impose a racism fine on Nigel Farage. And by the way, those leopards are still nibbling at his face because this is another GB News host.
I have encountered Albie. I find him quite a nasty little young man, if I'm honest with you.
And again, I want his case with the Good Law Project to succeed because ultimately all that matters is defeating racism, and GB News is a major problem in that regard. But I am enjoying the leopard buffet. It's important to remember that as much as those on the right would love you to believe that we on the left push this idea that ethnic minority people are somehow better than white people, no, that's not the point, and this is an example that shittiness knows no colour. Whether it's Dominique Samuels effectively admitting that the Daily Mail would write racist articles and then pay her to put her name to it, or Albie Amankona supporting GB News for years despite their racism. There are people of every colour who are willing to facilitate dangerous, evil narratives for money. But we can discuss another day how racism and capitalism are two beasts that feed each other. For now, let's just enjoy the poetic justice. I'm Femi. Make sure you follow F Politics or Politics as an FU. Have a great week.